Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Hi, David. Is it okay if I call you that? The counselor asked softly, her voice calm and soothing. I nodded, indicating that it was fine with me. You can call me Elizabeth, or just Elle, she offered warmly, inviting me into her office. I know many people feel uncomfortable when they come here, so I try to avoid unnecessary formalities, she added, opening the door. Inside, Margaret, my wife, at least for now, was already waiting for me. As soon as I entered, she stood to greet me. Hello, David, she said quietly. You look well, she added, looking into my eyes intently. I glanced at her for a moment. You too, I replied, though it wasn't true. She stood there, unsure of what to do next, her gaze full of expectation. Elle observed her closely, trying to figure out what Margaret was waiting for. And then I noticed the longing in her eyes. It dawned on me what she needed. I opened my arms and she stepped forward, accepting the embrace. She was familiar, yet different. Thinner. Changed since I left home 2 months ago, shortly before Valentine's Day. That day was when I found out she had been cheating on me for the past 5 years. Elle cleared her throat gently, prompting Margaret to reluctantly release me and return to her seat. Elle gestured for me to sit as well, arranging us so that we could face each other. Let's start by clarifying why we're here, Elle began. I'll start. My role is to guide this conversation so that each of you can take something valuable from it. After this, you will decide whether you want to continue together, separately, or perhaps pursue both paths. I'm not here to judge or assign blame, she explained, leaning forward slightly. I may ask questions, but the true answers come from you both. I'm just here to help you find them. She leaned back in her chair and turned to me. David, what brought you here? What do you want to achieve? I had asked myself that question, and I decided to be honest. I'm here because my wife agreed to the financial arrangement I proposed, but only on the condition that I attend this meeting, I said. After a pause, I added, I also want to understand how I failed as a husband and what drove my wife to be with someone else. Elle nodded thoughtfully, jotting something down in her notebook. Then she looked at Margaret. Margaret, she gently prompted. Margaret wiped away the tears that had already formed in her eyes. I'm here to let my husband know that none of this is his fault. These are my mistakes. It doesn't matter what I want now because it's already too late. Elle frowned slightly but didn't comment right away, scribbling something else before glancing back at Margaret. As I understand, your husband initiated the divorce, and yet you're saying that you believe it's entirely your fault. Can you explain more about how it got to this point? Margaret hesitated, glancing at me before beginning. To her credit, she didn't hide anything. She told Elle everything. 5 years ago, at an annual real estate management conference, her specialization was university property, Margaret reconnected with an old college friend. That evening, they reminisced, and later that night, their old relationship reignited. If it had been a one-time thing, I might never have found out. But it happened again at the next 2 conferences, and it would have happened again this year if I hadn't discovered it. A waitress at a restaurant, while I was ordering roses to send to Margaret for Valentine's Day, casually mentioned her affair. When I confronted Margaret the day before she was set to leave for another conference, she confessed everything. She said it was supposed to be the last time, as her lover's wife was pregnant, and we had been planning to start a family ourselves. In the end, 5 lives were shattered over a few stolen moments of memories. When Margaret finished her confession, there was a long silence as we waited for Elle to finish writing her notes. Margaret looked at me, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all. I was sorry, too. Once I had believed we had something special. Elle paused for a moment, then quietly asked, Margaret, can you explain how meeting an old friend led to you sleeping with him? My wife cast a troubled glance at me. Choosing her words carefully, she cautiously replied, likely considering my feelings. There was a sort of personal inertia that created a certain reaction between us. Alcohol acted as a catalyst, lowering the barrier to crossing that line. Elle looked at me, as if checking whether I was as puzzled by Margaret's explanation as she was. I took a moment to process what I'd heard, then nodded in understanding. That's an interesting metaphor, I said. However, Elle wasn't satisfied with the answer and decided to press further. Sorry for being direct, she interrupted, but can you say that more plainly? Margaret turned to me for support, but I shook my head. No, I said. This is your analogy. You need to explain it. With a heavy sigh, Margaret continued. Michael and I were part of the same group of friends for over 2 years. Often, especially on weekends, we ended up alone. We spent time together. A few times it ended with us sleeping together. We didn't have a serious relationship, she explained. In fact, we weren't really a couple, so there was no formal breakup. Whatever it was, she trailed off, a sad smile forming on her lips. It never really had a proper end. We just gradually drifted apart, Margaret added, wiping away a tear. Her voice grew more resolute as she went on. I'm not trying to justify my actions. It was wrong, but that inertia still existed. When Michael and I were alone, away from home, like during our college days, we slipped back into old habits. She started twisting the rings on her fingers, a gesture I'd seen before when we first discussed this. I remembered how I had taken off my own ring back then, stunned by her betrayal. I wondered if she had noticed it at the time. As for what happened, Margaret said, let me explain it this way. Imagine a scenario with Alice and Bob. I almost smiled, realizing she had actually listened when I explained quantum cryptography to her. Alice and Bob were names we often used for imaginary people when discussing secure communication. Seeing my reaction, Margaret gave a crooked smile. Yes, I was listening, she admitted. Then, turning to Ella, she continued. Imagine that Alice had a major argument with her partner, Bob. Or maybe Bob was selfish or bad in bed. Whatever the reason, she decides to cheat on him. She buys new lingerie, goes out looking for attention, and makes it clear she's available. Margaret paused. That takes planning, effort, and there's a risk involved. At any moment, Alice could stop and think, is this worth it? But I wasn't like Alice. I had no desire to seek someone out. David and I were happy together, and that's where alcohol comes into play. With a deep sigh, she continued, visibly upset. There was already something between Michael and me in the past. There was no temptation, no big decision to go further. It just happened. The emotional boundary between us had been crossed long ago, she said with heavy regret in her voice. Alcohol simply made it easier to ignore that boundary. It was like a spark that set everything in motion. Elle interjected. Like activation energy, right? Margaret nodded. Exactly. Some reactions need a lot of energy to start, but if there's a gas leak, even a small spark can cause an explosion that destroys the entire house. That's what happened between us after that night in the bar. Under the influence of alcohol, your previous connection with a college friend was so emotionally superficial that you simply reverted to old patterns of behavior, almost without any emotional involvement, Elle noted. Yes, Margaret replied. The situation was familiar, and we acted the way we always had, without thinking about the consequences. That's why it affected me, but not David. She turned to me. That's why I asked you to come today, she continued. I wanted you to understand that my actions were solely my responsibility, not yours. Elle added, but you moved on with your life. Yes, my wife admitted. Not right after the first time, but after we parted on the second night. And then, a year later, it happened again. We met, and I spent the night with Michael because I could. It became a habit. Every time our paths crossed, it felt like our directions changed, she explained, watching me closely, trying to gauge whether I was following her line of thought. I've thought about it a lot, she added, and tried to explain what happened without getting overly emotional. I listened carefully. When you and Michael reconnected, both of you had your own lives, but your shared past seemed to shift you onto a different path. Like Newton's second law, I asked. Exactly. And after that, every time you met, you continued down this new path. Yes, she responded with a deep sigh. Last year we shared a room. This year we planned to spend another night together, but agreed it would be the last time. Elle asked, Weren't you afraid of pregnancy or diseases? No, Margaret answered confidently. I was on birth control and we used protection. I'm not a moralist, Elle admitted, but even I wouldn't return to my husband after being with another man. I asked, did you ever wonder why he had contraceptives with him? No, Margaret admitted. It was just luck, she added bitterly. If Michael hadn't had them, we wouldn't have been intimate. I assumed they were in his bag when he was with Jenna, I said. Jenna checked his luggage when I called her, just like I went through yours. She found a box of 12 condoms in his laundry bag. Margaret lowered her gaze, embarrassed. I'm not finished, I said. There was a receipt in the box, dated January of this year, I continued, and there were 8 left. Margaret immediately understood, her face expressing sadness. So I'm not just a cheater, but a fool, she muttered, leaning back in her chair and staring at the ceiling. I tried to comprehend how she could so easily sleep with another man. Was it simply a convenient excuse? I wanted to understand, though I knew any explanation would sound like self-justification. Her regret was clear, but she didn't try to hide her guilt. Using Newton's laws as a metaphor was clever, but unfortunately, the third law mattered too. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, I said. Margaret's connection with Michael had caused a distancing in our relationship. Elle turned to me and asked, David, do you believe Margaret is telling the truth? I replied that I did. Elle continued, I'm not asking you to forgive her actions, but do you see the difference between a partner seeking new intimate experiences and 2 people continuing an old, unresolved connection? I needed time to think. Let me rephrase, Elle said. Is there anything in Margaret's words that makes you think your role as her husband could have influenced her choices? Both women remained silent as I pondered the question. On that decisive day, I went through the suitcase she had packed for the conference. Inside, I found her everyday clothes and underwear, nothing unusual, nothing she wouldn't normally wear around me. She hadn't packed anything special for Michael. Moreover, the delicate lingerie in her drawer remained untouched. Whatever their affair was, it didn't seem like a passionate, fiery romance, but rather something insignificant and uninspired. As the conference approached, our intimacy remained unchanged. There were no noticeable shifts in our sex life, and my wife seemed content with the state of our relationship. Occasionally, she hinted that she was open to trying something new if I wanted, but she never pushed it. We both cared about each other's pleasure, and there wasn't a sense that either of us was hiding anything. I looked up. No, I answered Ella's question. I believe Margaret acted on her own, without direct connection to me. Elle reminded me of our earlier conversations, pointing out that I once said I wanted to understand how I had failed as a husband. She let that thought linger in the air before asking, Do you still feel that way? I shook my head. The situation arose from events beyond my control. Margaret should have seen the warning signs and avoided the path she chose, but she didn't. It wasn't my fault. No. I couldn't have changed anything, not knowing what was happening between them, I admitted. Then Ella turned to my wife. Margaret, you mentioned that you wanted to show your husband that his mistakes weren't the reason you drifted apart. Hearing his response, do you feel you've succeeded in doing that? Yes, she whispered quietly. Elle returned to her notes. You also said that what you wanted wasn't anything significant. Can you explain why you feel that way? Margaret's eyes met mine, filled with sadness. Because my husband is a man of logic, and he respects the opinions of those he admires. There's one person whose advice is particularly important here. She shifted her gaze to Elle, addressing her directly. I want my husband to take me back. But despite my deep desire for that, there's someone he greatly admires, Albert Einstein, and he effectively advised him not to. Elle looked puzzled, but I understood her reasoning. Margaret dabbed her nose with a tissue, her eyes welling up, and explained to the counselor. Although some doubt that Einstein actually said it, he is often credited with the idea that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. She shrugged with a hint of resignation. With such advice from someone David truly respects, why would he even consider giving me another chance? The session ended there, but as we said our goodbyes, I only said, "Margaret, I regret wasting 23 years of my life on you. You're not worthy of me. As per the agreement, you'll get 15% of everything we have after the divorce. Goodbye." This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Everything started in the most ordinary way. A few weeks ago, Harper casually mentioned that Evelyn had invited her to visit a stable nearby. At the time, I didn't give it much thought. Harper and her circle always seemed to be into the latest trendy activities, so I assumed this was just another passing interest. But when she came back that evening, something was different. There was a sparkle in her eyes, one I hadn't seen in years. She couldn't stop talking about horses, how strong and majestic they were, how they moved with such grace and power. I have to admit, it was nice to see her so excited about something. During dinner, she beamed as she recounted her day. "You should have seen them, Lucas," she said, her face glowing with enthusiasm. "They're magnificent creatures." I smiled at her energy, happy that she had such a good time. "I'm glad you enjoyed it, dear," I replied. I didn't realize then that this was just the beginning. In the following days, horses became the central topic of our conversations. Harper started reading equestrian magazines, watching endless videos about horse care and riding techniques, and even began sketching horses in a notebook, a hobby she hadn't indulged in since her brief flirtation with art back in college. One morning over breakfast, she announced her next step. "I think I'm going to take riding lessons," she said, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I was a bit surprised, but I supported her. "If it makes you happy, go for it," I said, still finding her new interest amusing. But as the days turned into weeks, a strange unease began to settle over me. Harper started spending more and more time at the stables. Almost every evening she would dash out of the house, barely glancing my way. "Off to the stables again?" I'd ask, trying to keep my tone even. "Yes, dear. Don't wait up for me," she'd reply, already halfway out the door, leaving me alone in our now too quiet home. It wasn't just how often she left that worried me. It was how she came back, cheeks flushed, full of energy, smelling of hay and leather. And then there were the frequent messages from her friends, Sarah and Anna, that made her laugh as they exchanged stories about their adventures at the stables. Something wasn't sitting right with me, but every time I tried to bring it up, Harper would brush it off, telling another story about her favorite horse or her progress in riding. Now, sitting in my study with a glass of scotch, listening to the sound of Harper's car pulling away once again, I can't help but wonder, what's really going on at that stable? It was a cold Thursday evening, late September, around 8 p.m. I was nervously pacing the living room. The city lights flickered beyond the panoramic windows, but I was too distracted to notice them. For the 100th time, I glanced at the clock. Harper was late again. Right on cue, I heard the elevator doors open, followed by the sharp clicks of her heels on the marble floor. Harper burst into the apartment, her cheeks rosy, her eyes sparkling with that familiar energy. "You're late," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She barely looked at me as she took off her coat. "Oh, you know how it is. Time flies when I'm at the stables." I watched her walk into the kitchen, noting how lively she seemed, how much she had changed over the past few weeks. It should have made me happy, but instead, an uneasy feeling twisted in my gut. "Harper, we need to talk," I said, following her into the kitchen. She was already pouring herself a glass of wine. "About what?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the glass. "About your obsession with horses," I replied. "It's been 5 weeks, and it's all you talk about, all you do." Harper turned to face me, her green eyes narrowing. "It's not an obsession, Lucas. It's a hobby, and I enjoy it." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling frustration build inside me. "A hobby that takes up every evening? It's all you seem to think about now." She took a slow sip of wine, her shoulders tensing. I didn't realize I needed your permission to have interests outside of this apartment. That's not what I meant, and you know it. My voice was rising. We hardly spend any time together. You're always running off, coming home late. What's really going on at that stable, Harper? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, but it disappeared so quickly that I couldn't be sure. There's nothing going on between us, Lucas, she said, her voice cold as steel. I'm just learning to ride and enjoying my time with these amazing animals. Is it so hard for you to accept that I can find happiness in something outside your world? Her words stung, but I refused to back down. That's not the point. You've changed. You've become distant. You barely touch me anymore. Half the time you don't even look at me. If something's wrong, just say it. Harper slammed her glass down on the table with a loud clink. The only thing wrong here is your paranoia, she snapped. I'm going to take a shower. As she walked past me, I caught a scent that wasn't her usual fragrance. Leather and hay. I froze, watching her disappear down the hallway, my suspicions growing stronger. Something was definitely wrong, and I was determined to find out what. I decided to approach David at the charity event, hoping he could shed some light on this strange situation. Weaving through the crowd in the ballroom, I spotted him at the bar, looking as tense as I felt. "David, how's it going?" I greeted him, forcing a casual smile. He turned to me, clearly surprised. "Oh, Lucas, I'm fine, I guess. How about you?" Lowering my voice, I got straight to the point. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Have you noticed anything odd about Sarah lately?" David's expression darkened, and he glanced around before leaning in closer. "You too? I thought I was losing my mind. Sarah's been acting really strange." He hesitated before continuing. "She's always at that damn stable, constantly talking about horses. It's like she's a completely different person." A heavy feeling settled in my stomach. Harper's doing the same thing, rushing off to the stables, coming home late, barely talking to me. "Exactly," David exclaimed, then lowered his voice again. "I don't get it. Sarah used to hate horses, and now it's all she thinks about." A cold sweat broke out on my skin. This was worse than I'd imagined. "Have you tried talking to her about it?" I asked. David shook his head, frustration evident on his face. "She just brushes me off, says I'm being paranoid, but something's definitely wrong." Thanking him, I made my way across the room, my mind racing. I needed to dig deeper. Then I noticed Maximilian by the window, looking tense, which was unusual for him. "Maximilian," I called out as I approached. "Is everything okay?" He turned to me, his usual charm gone. "Honestly, Lucas, no. Anna's been different." My heart sank. "Let me guess. Spending all her time at the stable?" Maximilian's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you know?" "Harper and Sarah are acting the same way," I muttered under my breath. "They're obsessed with horses, always at the stable, getting more distant by the day." Maximilian's face paled. "What the hell is going on, Lucas?" I shook my head, the sense of unease growing stronger. "I don't know," I replied quietly, "but something is definitely wrong. Lately, we've all been growing suspicious that our wives are hiding something, and all the signs pointed to that stable." A sense of unease had been building between us as we exchanged worried glances, and the reality of the situation became increasingly clear. Whatever was happening in that stable, it was affecting all of our wives. I was determined to find out what it was. Standing by the window, I watched the sun set in a fiery mix of orange and pink. The clock showed 8:05 p.m. Harper still wasn't home. I sighed heavily, running a hand through my hair. This routine had become disturbingly common in recent weeks. The sound of the front door clicking open pulled me from my thoughts. Turning around, I saw Harper enter, her face flushed and a strange gleam in her eyes. "Hi," I greeted her, trying to maintain a calm and neutral tone. "How was your day?" I asked. Her gaze shifted sideways. "Oh, you know, the usual," she replied. I noticed a smear of dirt on the hem of her expensive white blouse. "Looks like you had an adventure," I commented, nodding toward the stain. She glanced down quickly, and for a moment her face reflected some emotion. Guilt? It flashed for a second, and then disappeared. Ah, that. I must have brushed against something in the stable, she said casually. No big deal. I watched as she headed to our bedroom to change. A few minutes later, she returned with wet hair, probably after a quick shower. But as she walked past, I caught a faint yet distinct smell. The scent of the stable still lingered. Harper, I began, feeling a knot tighten inside me. Can we talk about the stable? She turned to me with a wary expression. What do you mean? Just. I hesitated. You've been spending so much time at the stable lately. I barely see you. Is everything okay? Her eyes flickered, but the smile she gave me wasn't one I recognized. There was something unnatural about it, and it made my stomach churn. Oh, Lucas, she said softly, almost dreamily. You wouldn't understand. The horses, they're incredible. It's like they understand me in ways people can't. A chill ran down my spine at her words. The way she talked about the horses seemed strange, too intimate, too personal. It unsettled me. What do you mean? I asked, trying to mask my growing concern. Her gaze became distant. They're so strong, so free. When I'm with them, I finally feel like myself. It's hard to explain. I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. Harper, I'm glad you found something you enjoy, but don't you think it's becoming a bit obsessive? She turned sharply, her eyes now sharp and focused. Obsessive? You don't understand, Lucas. It's not just a hobby. It's everything. The intensity of her words caught me off guard. Before I could say anything else, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in even greater confusion and anxiety. As I watched her disappear into her studio, a troubling thought crossed my mind. This obsession with the stable was more than she was letting on, and I was going to find out what it was. That evening, I called David and Maximilian into my study. This growing mystery surrounding our wives had been gnawing at me, and I needed to know if they had noticed the same. Once we were all settled into the leather chairs, drinks in hand, a heavy silence hung in the air. I cleared my throat, breaking it. Gentlemen, I think we all know why we're here. David nodded, his usually cheerful face now lined with worry. It's getting worse, he admitted. Evelyn barely talks to me anymore. When she's not at the stable, she's like she's switched off. She's distant, like her mind is somewhere far away. Maximilian sipped his scotch slowly, his expression equally troubled. The unspoken fear we all shared hovered between us. Something was happening to our wives, and we were running out of time to figure out what it was. Anna had changed, too. When she comes back, she smells of horses and hay. When I try to touch her, she pulls away like a stranger. Harper is acting the same way, I muttered, clenching my teeth. It's as if she's become a completely different person. This obsession, it's unnatural, David quietly remarked, casting me a worried glance. His words echoed our shared fears, ones we were too afraid to voice. After a brief pause, he hesitantly but firmly continued. Do you think there could be someone else at the stables? I shook my head, though the thought had crossed my mind more than once. I've thought about it, but it doesn't make sense. The secrecy, the constant need to be there. It feels like more than just an affair. Maximilian, who had been silently listening, leaned in closer and lowered his voice. What if it's not about someone but something? I furrowed my brow. What do you mean? He hesitated, then decisively continued, his words heavy. The horses. They're always talking about the horses. The thought hit me like a sudden blow. You can't seriously mean... I trailed off, trying to grasp the implication. It's madness, David muttered, but the doubt in his eyes betrayed him. It wasn't so easy to dismiss the idea. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I don't want to believe it, but we can't ignore the possibility. Something's wrong, and we need to figure out what it is. Maximilian slowly nodded, his face reflecting grim determination. We'll have to keep a closer watch on them. Follow them, if necessary, I added, my voice colder than I expected. David gave me a glance, his voice barely a whisper. And if we're right? I met their gazes, feeling the weight of what we were about to do. Then we stop it, no matter the cost. Friday, 10:30 p.m. The moon hangs low in the sky, its light barely breaking through the thick clouds as we pull off the gravel road some distance from the stables. We kill the headlights, the crunch of tires fading into the quiet of the night. Darkness surrounds us, thick and heavy, hiding our movements as we step out of the car. No one speaks. There's no need. Our breathing is slow, heavy, adding to the tension in the air. I steal a glance at David, then at Maximilian. With every step toward the stables, my jaw clenches tighter. A cold knot forms in my stomach, growing tighter with each passing moment. What are we even expecting to find? Maximilian whispered under his breath, gripping his phone as if it was the only thing keeping him grounded, his other hand buried deep in his pocket. "Shut up, or we won't find anything," I hissed back, trying to keep my voice low but firm. Maximilian fell silent, and we continued forward, slowly approaching the looming stables. It felt as though they were hiding something, as if the walls were keeping a dark secret. The sounds reached us first, laughter, quiet and carefree. My heart froze when I recognized Harper's voice, mingling with others. She sounded happy. They all did. A knot twisted in my gut, and I couldn't tell if that made the situation better or worse. David nudged me, pointing toward the stable. "There's a window," he whispered. "We need to take a look." We moved quickly, the crunch of the ground underfoot sounding too loud in the silence, but we made it to the window unnoticed. The old, crooked frame was slightly open, a perfect gap to listen through. I crouched down and peeked inside. The sound of horses shifting their hooves on the floor filled the space, and then I heard them, the women. My breath caught as I strained to hear more. They are inside. Harper, Sarah, Anna, all of them. Their riding gear hangs loosely on them, as if taking it off completely would have required no effort. Their faces are flushed, as though something is exciting them, but it's a kind of energy I can't explain. The strangest part? They're giggling. The air around them is tense, their movements sharp and unsteady. These are not the women we know. Harper's hand slowly glides along the horse's neck, almost teasing the animal, and it makes my stomach churn uncomfortably. Her fingers linger, then she leans in, her lips brush the horse's ear, and she whispers something, but I can't make out the words. What the hell is she saying? David's voice, low and strained, mirrors the same unease that's growing in my chest. A quick glance at him confirms he's just as disturbed as I am. I look at my wife, standing too close to that horse, whispering words that only she can hear, and I wonder if she's lost her mind. Nothing makes sense anymore. "They're acting strange," Maximilian mumbles behind me, barely concealing panic in his voice. "Do you think this feels wrong? Even worse than wrong?" Before I can respond, something changes. The women suddenly spring into action, as if responding to some invisible signal. Harper removes her hand from the horse and gestures to the others, leading them deeper into the stable. The mood quiets, but the tension remains, hanging in the air like a heavy weight. They move toward another horse, embracing it in a way that sends a chill down my spine. It's too close, too intimate, too wrong. And then, just like that, they're gone. They disappear into the depths of the stable, taking the horse with them, leaving us standing there, unsure of what to do next. My pulse quickens as I approach the entrance of the stable, David and Maximilian flanking me. I see the same mixture of fear and determination on their faces that I feel coursing through my veins. As we near the door, my foot nudges something soft. I look down, and my blood runs cold. There, carelessly discarded on the floor, is a pile of women's clothing. My hands tremble as I crouch down, my fingers brushing the scarf I know all too well. Harper's scarf. The one I gave her for Christmas. The silk feels like an accusation against my skin. "Jesus Christ," David whispers faintly. He picks up a blouse from the ground that I instantly recognize, Sarah's favorite blouse. A sharp intake of breath from Maximilian tells me he's found something belonging to Anna. We exchange glances, none of us daring to voice the horror building in our minds. What we've found is too disturbing, too twisted to fully comprehend. My grip on Harper's scarf tightens as a wave of emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion, threatens to overwhelm me. What the hell are we about to witness? I clutch the fabric in my fist and force myself to breathe. We have to go inside, I say, my voice sounding distant, unfamiliar. Whatever's happening in there, we need to find out. David nods firmly, his usual charm replaced by grim seriousness. Maximilian's eyes are cold and focused, locked on the stable door. With one final look at each other, we move forward, bracing ourselves for the madness that awaits us inside. I forcefully push the stable door open, my heart pounding in my chest. David and Maximilian follow behind me, their faces equally grim and determined. The door slams against the wall with a loud bang, and for a few moments, the only sound is our heavy breathing. Then we see them, Harper, Sarah, and Anna, huddled together like frightened animals caught in the headlights of a car. Their eyes are wide with shock, guilt etched on every line of their faces. I scan the room. Not a single horse. Just our wives, disheveled and looking like they've been caught in the act. But something still feels off. There's no trace of the horses they were so disturbingly close to just moments ago. Something is terribly wrong. As soon as I remain in the shadows, a familiar figure steps forward, and my heart sinks. Jack, the riding instructor, comes into the light, and suddenly everything makes sense. The late nights at the stables, the whispered phone conversations, Harper's strange obsession with riding. It was never about the horses. It was about him. So this is what all that riding was for? I spit out, my voice dripping with venom. Harper tries to say something, but my glare silences her immediately. Save it! I've seen enough! The truth hits me like a punch in the gut. At the other end of the room, David and Maximilian quickly grasp the situation. David's face contorts with rage as he turns to Sarah. You liar! He yells, his voice trembling with fury. Maximilian's eyes are fixed on Anna, filled with disgust and betrayal, but he remains silent, just staring. Jack, that sly bastard, tries to slip away unnoticed, but I won't let that happen. My blood boils, and I take a step toward him, my voice low and menacing. Get out, now! I pull out my phone and snap a few photos, capturing everything. Harper winces at the sound, but I don't care. This is all I need, I mutter under my breath. I don't wait for her reaction. I just turn on my heel and walk out. Each step feels like another nail in the coffin of what used to be my marriage. 20 years of marriage. David and Maximilian follow me, their anger hanging thick in the air. I don't look back. It's over. Over with Harper. Over with the lies and deception. As we step into the cool night, I take a deep breath, letting the cold air sharpen my senses. This isn't the end, not even close. The real consequences will come tomorrow. The next morning, I wake up already focused on what needs to be done. The bedroom feels strangely empty, and Harper's absence brings me relief. No need to deal with her today. I grab my phone and dial my lawyer's number. John, it's Lucas. Start the divorce, right now. There's a brief pause on the other end before John responds. Of course, Lucas. I assume you want to keep this confidential. Confidential, yes. But speed is the priority. Get it done quickly, and make sure she doesn't get a penny more than what she brought into the marriage. Not a single extra cent. Understood. I'll start the paperwork. Do you have anything to support your case? I think of the photos I took the night before. Yes, I'll send them over. Hanging up, I sit down at my desk and begin the process of cutting Harper off from our finances. A few quick clicks, and she's locked out of our joint accounts. It feels harsh, but I know it's necessary. My phone vibrates, pulling me out of my thoughts. It's David. Lucas, I filed the papers. Sarah's gone. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I reply, surprised at the steadiness of my voice. Just spoke to my lawyer. Harper has no idea what's coming. Good, David says. Maximilian's filing, too. We're having lunch later. Join us? I agree and hang up, returning to my computer. I start methodically erasing every trace of Harper from my life. Photos? Deleted. Social media links? Gone. Her belongings? Already packed and ready to be thrown out. By noon, I received the last piece of news I've been waiting for. Jack's been fired from the stables. His reputation? Shattered. Everyone in our circle already knows about his betrayal, and the rumors are spreading fast. Well, that's just perfect, I muttered under my breath as I headed toward our usual lunch spot, a private club where only the select few gathered. When I walked in, David and Maximilian were already seated at the table, surrounded by a serious, almost ominous atmosphere. Taking my seat, I raised my glass with a sharp nod. To new beginnings, gentlemen. Maximilian mirrored my gesture, his face as hard as stone. And to justice finally being served. David, looking a little pale, still managed to keep his voice steady. I never thought it would come to this, he admitted. But here we are. Over the next hour, we delved into discussions of plans, exchanging strategies and advice about lawyers. From the start, it was clear. None of us intended to back down. The lines had been drawn, and our wives had chosen their sides. Now, they would have to live with the consequences. As our conversation wound down, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Harper. Silently, I lifted the screen so the others could see. It read, "Lucas, please, we need to talk. What happened yesterday isn't what you think. Give me a chance to explain." David smirked quietly, as if any explanation could justify what we saw. Without a word, I deleted the message, leaving it unanswered. Soon, Harper would get her reply, in the form of a letter from my lawyer. By midday, the consequences of their choices had begun rippling through our social circles. Rumors spread fast. Harper, Sarah, and Anna were already being sidelined. Invitations were revoked, people distanced themselves, and gossip followed them like shadows. A deep sense of satisfaction began to grow within me. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was now about maintaining balance in our world. Every action has a price, and now they were paying it. That night, I sat alone in my office, holding a glass of scotch. The house, once filled with tension, now felt strangely quiet. Empty, yes, but as though a weight had been lifted, like an infection finally cut out. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was John, my lawyer. "Lucas, the papers have been filed. Harper's been served. She's asking for a meeting, but I've managed to talk her out of it for now." I sipped slowly, considering my next move. No meetings, no discussions. She made her choice, John. Now we move forward as much in my favor as possible. "Understood," John replied. "I'll keep you updated." As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. The decision was made, and now the process had begun. There would be pain, no doubt about that. But deep down, I knew I was on the right path. Standing by the window, I gazed out at the city, the lights flickering in the distance. A new chapter was unfolding before me, without Harper, without deception. It was time to move on, to rebuild. And for the first time in a long while, I was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Meanwhile, the traitors would be scrambling for a long time, trapped in the hole they had dug for themselves. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.